Good evening, beautiful souls. Welcome to episode 8 of Men Have Feelings Too. Who knew? Today, my guest on the show is Nader Hanna. He's a master mentalist, magician, and a fellow hypnotherapist. It's so great to have you on, Nader.
Awesome. No, thank you for having me, Lauren. This is a real pleasure.
So, Nader, tell me, what made you want to become a mentalist?
Sure. So my father was an amateur magician in Egypt, which is where I was born, and he showed me a card trick, and that's sort of what started that passion for me. I was about 7 or 8 years old. I don't remember exactly my age, but I know it was around there because it was right after we immigrated to this country.
Okay.
Shortly after, and I didn't speak any English. Arabic and it's funny too because I was a very late talker in life. So, and now you can't shut me up at all. But no, I was a very late talker.
Making up for lost time.
Making up for lost time. There you go. So I think my mom said I was around 4 or 5 when I really started to say sentences. Before that, it was just like a few words. But when we came to this country, I really had this language, handicap because I was barely starting to pick up Arabic. And now I'm like learning a whole new language. And it's already hard being an immigrant in a new country where you have no friends, you can't really communicate with anyone. And, my sister was in the same school, but she was a year ahead of me, so I didn't have her in the same classes. And we sort of, we felt different, and we obviously were. And so at that point, communicating and making friends was very challenging. And the magic was actually a way for me to feel special.
Yeah.
And I remember doing that same card trick my dad showed me to people from school, and I sort of became that, that kid who does magic, the magic boy. And,
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So it kind of gave you like an identity.
Exactly, gave me an identity. I felt, I didn't feel special prior to that. I felt like this was making me unique and stand out, and it was allowing me to have this way of communicating with people from school that made me feel different, and special. And so, and then every week they wanted to see a new trick, and so I'd have to go to my dad, show me another card trick, and I think I exhausted all the card tricks he knew. And then very fortunate, a family friend, relative, we, in the Egyptian community, it's so small because we're part of this community called Coptic Christians, which you might have heard of, but it's such a small community. It's already 10% of the Egyptian population, but when you get to a big country like the United States, it's a much smaller community. So you stick together. So family friends become relatives in a way.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Certainly, and so one of our family friends saw that I had an interest in magic, and he bought me my first magic book. It was called The Klutz Book of Magic, and I did every trick, literally every trick in that book. I did for a long time, and I can still do actually. But just to make a long story short, I sort of fell off of it in high school, and then I around 10th or 11th grade, and then I got back into it around the mid 2000s, like 2008, 2009, maybe late to mid 2000s, and I've been doing it ever since. And I got more into mentalism, which is, the mind reading aspect of magic.
That is interesting. Tell me something about that. I just don't know how people are able to do that.
Sure. Well,
you don't have to give away any of your secrets or anything, but
yeah. Yeah, because we're still sworn to secrecy, even as a mentalist, excuse me. But so mind reading, there's a few aspects of mind reading that are very different than your standard magic illusion, right? Because you are picking up things about the person that is not done via a trick or an illusion, but rather you are really honing in on them, and you're becoming really good at reading people.
Yeah.
Sensing what they're thinking, and even to some extent directing where it's supposed to go. So like a prediction, like for example, some mentalists will have something that they predicted beforehand. Well, instead of them peering into the future and seeing beyond the veil and predicting something, it's rather that they're guiding you, to a particular outcome. So they also become good at that sort of aspect of human interaction, of being able to steer someone in a very subtle way to a particular outcome.
That's probably very helpful for your hypnotherapy career.
Totally. And this, it's all about building rapport.
Yeah.
So the same goes for a performer, whether it's a comedian or anyone who does any sort of performance where you're interacting with an audience. Rapport is so important. If they like you, your job is 100 times more
easy. Right.
Yeah.
So how much intuition and kind of like psychic ability does it take to be a mentalist? Is there any of that involved in it?
Yes, certainly. The thing is, I try to separate myself from that word psychic as much as I can, but it's hard to separate yourself from that, because what you're doing is, for all intents and purposes, is perceived to be psychic or a sixth sense.
Yeah.
But the reason why I separate myself from it is because I don't feel necessarily that what I'm doing, no one can do, and that I'm just gifted in a particular way. I think other people can do it. However, I just have some sort of natural ability for it, and I've trained myself for it to do it. So in aspects of mind reading, I more fancy myself as a mind reader. And when someone really thinks hard about something, they tend to project that thought, and they don't realize they're projecting that thought oftentimes. And a really sensitive or hypersensitive person can pick up that thought. And I'm very sensitive to that. And I think maybe part of it has to do with, maybe I'm a natural empath, or, since I was young, I didn't really communicate very well. So I would be just very observant of people and trying to sense their emotions and what they really were thinking of me, rather than what they were saying, perhaps. So that's part of, that part of magic, or the mind reading mentalism. It's fun. I think it's an adult form of magic.
Yeah.
You're not making doves appear. You're not, disappearing.
Or do you like carry this over into like your friendships and stuff? Do you like read your friends' minds?
I find the closer you are to people, the harder it is to read them.
You know what? The same thing with intuition. Like, the closer you are to people, and the more you like, my friend can like text me like, hey, this guy texted me, what do you think? I'm like, let me feel into his energy. And I can be like, right?
Yeah.
Like a whole paragraph. But then when it comes to like myself, it's like, when I try, I'll just get little things like, yeah, sometimes, or, things that like don't even make sense.
Yeah. I agree 100% with that.
Yeah.
So, and I think too, it goes back to that saying,
but then when you don't try, sometimes that information just comes.
Yes.
But you can't try with people, that's the thing.
Yeah. People, it's hard because you know them so well. And so whatever you do is going to look like it's going to be perceived as you're just being able to read me because you know me.
Yes and no. I mean, even if you know people really well, there's still some things that you can intuit, that they may not even be aware of, or you're not aware of in the dynamic. But the more you try, the more your own like monkey mind comes in. That's the thing with trying. We both know that from school.
True. Yeah.
You try.
Try is an instant failure.
Yeah. No. I don't even like that word.
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. They make you re-examine that word in a way that you don't almost want to add it to anything besides just hypnosis.
Right. And I find myself using words that like I'll say it and I'm like, why am I even using that word? I don't really even like that word, but we're just so used to using them.
Totally. Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, you've pretty much said like one of the aspects of hypnosis too. Like, when you're so used to, you know, they tell, you know, when you're first starting off, you have a script generally that you're kind of going along and, oh, okay, this gives me a framework. But then you realize like you don't need the script. You can just kind of formulate your own
Yeah.
suggestions.
It's
But then
so
you
good
find,
when you do it that way.
oh, it's
That's
way
where
better.
intuition really comes in too, like in sessions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. You know, John Melton, who was my mentor through the program, who was awesome. I love that guy. He said that all his sessions are just his own intuition of what he thinks he should suggest, or the approach of how he's going to approach every session. He just intuitively comes to the answer.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would love like to only work with practitioners that work like that.
I agree.
You
I
know,
totally agree.
I mean, when I first started doing hypnotherapy and reading off the script, I don't really think that I got that many results. I mean, a little bit, but the more intuitive and the more in the moment you are and the more with the client, because if you're reading the script, you're not like with the client, you're not fully present.
I agree. 100%. 100%. In fact, you're, like you said, it's your energy. It's what you're focusing on. You're more about the script. So part of your energy is given to that as opposed to the client directly.
Yeah. I even find myself like when I'm talking, like in these episodes, for instance, when I'm like telling a story, my presence will like slip away a little bit and I'll go back to that story or something. And I've really been trying to just like, even when I'm telling a story, to just stay.
Yeah. Stay in the present.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember we used to practice with each other. And I always thought, I was like, wow, Lauren's really good. Like I'm going into hypnosis way deeper than with most other people. And I think it's your natural sort of empathy and connection with people that you've already had prior to going into hypnosis.
Well, I thank
like
you.
a good framework. Yeah, of course. Is most of your practice now just through Zoom?
Actually, I am building a program right now called Embodied Sacred Union. I work with women. It's a journey for them to come home to themselves through like self-love and just really living in their truth and seeing their own light. But what the program is about is manifesting a sacred relationship. But in order to do that, you have to have a sacred relationship with yourself.
Yes.
You know, so I use hypnosis to just help them kind of like see around their patterns, see into some of their unconscious beliefs about men. Because if they think that like, you know, men are all assholes or men are all one thing or another thing, they're not going to manifest a good man.
Yeah.
And then their beliefs about women, because that helps, you know, if you clear those up, that's going to help them feel more comfortable, like being in their full woman. So yeah, it's a really fun program. We have a little ritual, like a manifestation ritual at the end.
Wow. You know, I was also interested too, because I remember you just recently you posted something about this breath work session you did, and it was like you really like connected with stuff and fixed stuff. And I was like, wow, that's what did you do exactly? And I was like trying to look it up. And
it was holotropic breath work. So it was 3 hours, 2.5 hours maybe, of really intense like breath work the whole time, just different breath works to like specific songs that would trigger like a certain emotion. And he would say stuff to kind of like trigger. I mean, there was over like 150 people in the room. People were crying, laughing, screaming.
Wow.
I saw into one of my core childhood wounds. And I was able to see it. And once I saw it, I was able to see how it like played out in my whole life. And I was able to like shatter it.
Wow.
So it was really fucking profound. And I saw how it negatively affected my whole entire life. Just this one limiting belief that maybe it didn't start, but the first time I saw it was when I was 5 years old. And before kindergarten started, there was this like kindergarten fair. So I was supposed to go meet all the kids I was supposed to be in school with. And the night before, my mom got like totally shit-faced and didn't take me to the fair. So I made that mean something. I made that mean that I was not chosen. She chose that over me. And then I made it mean that I didn't belong because I didn't get to meet the kids. So I was going in there when they were already all friends and I didn't belong and no one was going to choose me. So I got bullied like my whole school career, and just like it manifested in my friendships and my relationships. It's crazy that it took me like 40 years to see it, but I'm grateful that I did.
Wow. And it, there's a certain shine about you when you mentioned the experience itself, and I could really see it had a profound effect.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that, I mean, I have so many things that I'm doing right now, but I do want to get certified in holotrophic breath work.
I'd say you should, because you've firsthand experienced her. You could
Yeah.
easily sell it because you believe in it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I believe in all the modalities I practice, and I really feel like I embody everything that I teach my clients. That's important.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think that's why I connected with you really well through the program, is because something about you is very, very genuine. There's like a genuineness about what you do, and really wanting to help people.
I do.
Yeah, you don't always see it in everyone, and I mean, yeah, you can attest to that. But in your case, I saw it was very clear and very direct that you're doing this because you're on your journey and you want to help others who are on their journey.
Yeah.
And,
I
so
mean, if I can get where I am right now, anybody can do it.
What's funny, because we talk about things we inferentially pick up, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's part of hypnosis and how we take in information. And you mentioned like that rejection part of it that happened to you, that rejection story. What you inferred from it was so grand and beyond the actual intent done by your mom.
Right. It was simple. Like, it was simple. My mom was 25 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that was crazy how like one little event. Yeah.
And it's amazing how many people inferentially pick up information that's not your intention. Speaking of which, like, I've had friends who, you say something to, and you don't really mean it this way. It's just, it's just a very subtle thing. Like, oh yeah, no, not today. Like, I'm busy or something. Like, I can't hang out with you today. And they inferentially take it as, oh, you never want to hang out with me.
And that comes from a childhood wound.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
So what got you into hypnotherapy? Did you have any kind of like adverse childhood experiences that caused you to want to help others?
That's a really good question. I'm very fortunate because didn't really have big traumatic childhood experiences that sort of either led me towards being hurt and feeling that hurt and having the need to recover that. I think the biggest childhood experience was honestly the move from Egypt to the United States.
That's a pretty big one.
That's a big one. But, even then, my parents really, I guess I should sort of clarify for people who haven't really shared that experience. So my parents had my sister and I in a much later part of their life. And so when you have to move to another country and start over, it's a very hard thing to do, right? You generally don't have the finances to do it. You're taxing yourself financially to make that move. You're also stepping into a country you don't know the language very well. You don't really have a connection. The only connection is finding people who have those common, the common values you have, which are people of your own community. And so in that regard, it can be very traumatic. But
Yeah.
my parents, fortunately, they very fortunate for my folks. They took care of my sister and I, and really didn't make us feel like, we were less than, or even financially that we were not the most financially successful. They really gave my sister and I everything they could, and it gave us a very nurturing life. So I'm very fortunate there. I think what interested me in hypnosis was I was doing stage hypnosis before going to HMI. And when I started implementing a lot more stage hypnosis shows, or hypnosis into the mind reading shows, so I was doing, the shows were kind of broken down, or the longer shows, the 75-minute shows were broken down into mind reading for the first part, then hypnotism for the second part, and then I would end with a mind reading thing to just close it all off. But I noticed people were coming up to me after the show and saying, "Hey, can you help me quit smoking?" Or "I'm having trouble sleeping," or "I have this fear of public speaking, or doing anything in front of people. Can you help me with that?" And the problem was, as a stage hypnotist, you don't really always feel equipped to handle people's issues, right?
Right.
You can put on a performance, you can find the really suggestible people in the audience using suggestibility testing and bringing them up, and they really put on the show for you.
Although with that skill set, you could probably have a lot more success with your clients having the stage hypnosis skill set.
That's true. There's that confidence, perhaps. So both worlds have something to contribute to each other, whether it's a stage hypnotist or a hypnotherapist in an office or a clinical setting. But yeah, I didn't feel, I would think the best thing to do, and granted, there's probably stage hypnotists that do feel confident enough to say, "You know what? You have stage fright? I will hypnotize you, put you under, and suggest things, and boom," But I didn't necessarily feel like that was the right approach. So I would always say, "Oh yeah, I believe in hypnosis, and I suggest seeking out a hypnotherapist, but I'm not a hypnotherapist." That was my answer, or my reply. And then when COVID happened, all my shows got canceled. I had probably the most bookings I had, which was funny, in 2020, leading up to like all the closures. I had so many bookings, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm lined up here. I got this month taken care of." And then all of it just gone in an instant.
Yeah, the same thing happened with my friend. He's a magician on Disney cruise ships, and he got like screwed in COVID.
Yeah. Oh my, it was like, and because I'm so connected to the magic community, being, here at Hollywood, or being in Los Angeles next to Magic Castle, you make a lot of magician friends. So it was the same story throughout. Everyone had cancellations, and especially if you're doing magic full time, which I was at that point, it was devastating.
Oh, I can't imagine.
So I had all this free time, and the thought occurred to me, you know what? I do stage hypnosis, and because I can't perform on stage, what's another way to use hypnosis and hypnotherapy? Oh, why don't I take this time to go to a hypnotherapy school, or learn hypnotherapy? And I looked up, it's very easy to find HMI because it's one of the only, hypnotherapy schools around. So, especially if you're in Southern California. So I contacted them, and they were still kind of in that phase of, they're not sure, if they were going to do. Yeah, they weren't sure whether or not they're going to have classes in person, or they were going to find some other way, and they did through Zoom. And so that's how I got into hypnotherapy. In reality, I was just a stage hypnotist who people were asking for this, and I didn't really do it. So I said, I'm just closing another avenue of money that I could be making. And in a weird way, COVID and the closures gave me the opportunity, or the time, to invest to going to HMI.
Can you do stage hypnotism over Zoom with people?
No, I've never done that. I probably would never try.
Could you tell me about some like results that you've gotten with your clients? Like maybe like the coolest story?
Yes. In fact, the coolest story was, and we mentioned Zoom, and although I'm a big advocate of doing hypnosis in person, the client that probably had one of the best stories came through Zoom, and I would hypnotize her on Zoom. And she was a smoker, and she needed to be put on a kidney transplant list.
Okay.
But what she told me was that they were not putting her on the list because she was a smoker and she couldn't quit. And so she really needed to quit. And so I went through smoking cessation with her, and she quit completely. And then she was able to wait a little while, put herself on the kidney transplant list. And I told her, keep updating me, through email, even though she's, we're not doing sessions anymore. I still want to know her story. And and she's been, cigarette free for,
oh my God,
probably almost 7 months now. If I were to, I think I'm about 7 months now, if my memory serves me right. And that's all, the hypnosis, as we know, it's a tool, it's a modality, but it was her drive and willingness and need to quit, to finally quit. That was the big resource for the success. And the hypnosis just kind of pushed her in that direction. So it was really her. And
it always is. It always is,
Totally.
We're always our own healer. And what we do for our clients is just facilitate it and just help them see their own healer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We're a lot more powerful than we think.
Oh yeah. Yeah. People are realizing, though, they're realizing their power. They're seeing their light. There's a lot of healing happening now on the planet.
Yeah.
And the news and, media or whatever, they would like you to think that the world is in complete and total chaos. And in one aspect, it is. But there's this other polarity of how awful things are, how really dedicated people are to creating a new world and healing and acting from love and not fear.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you were saying that you were going to seminary school and you took a vow of celibacy. Tell me more about that.
Sure. Yeah. So probably this is a very different thing for a high schooler to want to do. But at 16, I started questioning, my own mortality and, my own reason for existing. And it was actually 9/11. Oh, there you are. It was actually 9/11 that made me do that. 9/11 was a very traumatic event. I was in high school when it happened.
Where did you live? Did you live in LA at the time?
Yeah, I was in Burbank.
Okay.
Still in Burbank. And 9/11 happened, and it was like, I really think I was a very innocent kid.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like lived in my own little bubble. I had my very small group of friends. I did magic. That was sort of my identity. And, I lived very carefree. Luckily, my parents really nurtured my sister and I, maybe over nurtured perhaps, because I was very, very innocent. And then when 9/11 happened, I sort of saw the world very differently. I saw the potential of evil on a mass scale like that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy because it wasn't just 9/11. I think 9/11 definitely, I think, was the big one for me, but it was also like the Columbine shooting in 99. Because I was I was just about to go to high school when that happened. And I don't know if you remember, but there was all these copycats, right after the Columbine shooting that were, giving threats at school. And just, it was a very strange time, that 99, 2000, 2001, those 3 years. It was just, the world started. I mean, granted, there's always been really bad things happening around.
Yeah, but there was definitely some energetic shifts going on then.
Yeah, it felt like it. It certainly felt like it. It felt like something was different, right? And 9/11 for me was a big one, especially being Middle Eastern, right, from Egypt. It was. I remember there was a guy in our church or our community who got killed. as a hate crime.
Whoa.
Yeah, he was a liquor store owner, if I remember correctly, or he ran a convenience shop. I forgot exactly if it was liquor store, convenience shop,
Hmm.
but a couple of men walked in, and just because he was Middle Eastern, and there was a lot of hate going around during that time for people from the
Oh
Middle East.
yeah,
Yeah, they pulled out a gun and just shot him point blank.
that's a
And,
shame.
yeah,
Wow.
it's a real shame.
It's
So
that's a testament to how much like media can control the mainstream population's
yeah,
minds, their thoughts, their beliefs. I won't even watch the news. It's so we got off track. Let's talk about the seminary and
oh
the
yeah,
celibacy vow.
sure. So yeah, I started 9/11 happened. I started looking into religion. We always went to church, but going to church was more of it was an expected thing. I wasn't totally involved in religion, or I wasn't religious or anything. I don't even think I read the Bible. I just went to Sunday school, and whatever they taught us, that was what I knew. And then I started looking into my faith, which is Orthodox Christianity. Oh, excuse me, Orthodox Christianity. And yeah, I started studying it. I started, reading the Bible, looking at other religions too. I was a big fan of looking at all aspects, and I really, to this day, I have an extreme love and respect for Eastern philosophy. I love Taoism.
Hmm.
I love Buddhism. In fact, the Tao Te Ching is, I love, one of my favorite things to read, and I read it as much as I can, whenever I can, because I think it's a really good book on just a good way to approach living. But I started really becoming more invested in theology. And then I guess you can call it, I don't want to call it escapism, because I don't think it really was. I think it was a desire to, at 16, it was more a desire to protect myself,
Hmm.
that I thought, well, maybe the best thing for me is to live this religious life of being a monk, and a Christian monk, which similar to Catholicism, the Orthodox have a monastic life. And the reason why I went that direction is, so the very first Egyptian Coptic monastery outside of Egypt was in California. And in the 90s, my parents used to take us to this monastery. It's called St. Anthony's Coptic Monastery. It's still here in California. It's just past Barstow, in a small town called Yermo, California. It's off the 15 freeway. So it's actually, if you live in Los Angeles, it's halfway from here to Vegas.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny dynamic.
I just learned today that the interstates go like in numbered order, like 25, 35, like 95, 75, 55, 35, all the way to California, and then 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, like it goes up and down. I had no idea.
Yeah, I don't think
I thought they were just like randomly like numbered or
randomly
whatever.
placed.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. It's funny. I never even bothered to examine that, but I would think that there's a system, right?
There's definitely a system. I found out today. I found that out from Facebook,
Oh, okay,
like a
cool.
meme or something. I've learned so much from memes.
Yes. It's amazing how much information you can get from one thing.
Yeah. So anyway, you took the celibacy vow and you were going to become a monk.
Yeah, although it's a lot more, there's a lot more loops you have to go to before you can be a monk. So you, in order to be a monk in the Orthodox Church, you need a letter of recommendation from your father of confession, a confession father. And my confession father would not give me one, because I was 16 years old. I mean, I wanted to do it right out of high school. So I was 18 years old at this point. He said no. And the reason he gave me was, you don't have a degree. You actually need a degree before you could go into the monastery. And at the time, it didn't make any sense, right? Because I'm like, well, I'm getting a degree in some sort of field that I'm not going to use. Like, this is kind of a waste of time and a waste of money. But he was right. I mean, he said that his reasoning was, when you go to the monastery, one of your biggest enemies is yourself, your own thoughts. And
God.
yeah, totally right. It still is, right?
Yeah,
So
I
for
was
a lot
gonna
of
say
us.
I'm not in the monastery, and that's one of my biggest enemies.
Oh yeah. And in the monastery, I think it's more amplified because you're secluded from a lot of things.
Mhm.
You don't have a lot of distractions. So keeping busy is a very big thing there. But he was right about that. And the reason why is so many of the monks in the monasteries they were pharmacists, doctors, engineers. And so if you go into the monastery without some sort of professional degree, not only does it look like escapism, right? It looks like you are just trying to escape the world because you can't survive in the world on your own.
That makes
But
sense.
rather, you're also going to start, your thoughts are going to start leaning towards, you know, I don't feel like I'm giving a proper, I don't feel like I gave the proper decision to be a monk and the proper sacrifice to be a monk, knowing that I just straight out of high school
Went
that was
into it, yeah.
went into it. So
Oh,
yeah, so
yeah, there's layers to it.
there's layers to it, right? It's because there's a sacrificial part of being a
Mhm.
monk, right? And so I thought about it. Okay, well, that makes sense. So I went to community college, and here in Los Angeles, a place called Valley College. And then after a few years there, got my AA, and then I transferred to a seminary. But there is no Orthodox seminary as far as back then, anyways. I didn't know of any that were in California. There was a lot of Reformed Christian seminaries, so Protestant seminaries. And so in order for me to even attend a Protestant seminary, I had to get a letter of approval from my diocese bishop. It's just the way the Orthodox and the Catholic sort of do things. So I had to go see our diocese bishop, Bishop Sarabian is his name. And he approved me to go to a Reformed Christian seminary that was a four-square Pentecostal seminary. And it was in the border of Van Nuys and Sherman Way, and it's called King's College and Seminary. And it's funny because apparently it's no longer there. They moved the school to Texas. But so I kind of feel special because I went to the original location, where it started,
Mhm.
and I graduated from the original location. So yeah, I went to seminary, and then I studied theology, and I got my degree in biblical studies. And then right out of seminary, I wanted to go into the monastery. And then my father confession objected again. He wouldn't give me that letter of recommendation. And he said, and again, very wise, but at the time I was just so eager to go that I wasn't understanding what he was saying, but what he told me was, there's no rush. If you go into the monastery now, what are you doing? You're just going to live at the monastery for the rest of your life. You can join the monastery now. You can join it in 5 years. You can join it in 10 years. There's no rush. And it's good to not rush, so you could really test these thoughts if this is something you really want to do. Because I was a young kid too, and very inexperienced with life. I had no girlfriend. I've never had a girlfriend at that time. In fact, I never had a crush on anyone. I was never in love with anyone. So I was, like I said, like from 16 on, I blocked out the idea of being in a relationship. So yeah, here I am in my mid-20s, and I'm, and I haven't experienced any of that, and I really haven't tested if dedicating myself to a monastic life for the remainder of my life was really the path to go. And so yeah, so through more waiting, and by the way, I should say I would go up to the monastery and spent what you would call spiritual retreats at the monastery. So sometimes it was a few days, sometimes it was like a week or two, or I think the longest I did was almost a month of living in the monastery. And they let you eat there, they let you sleep there. You do get assigned work, and then you have like a schedule that you maintain as someone going on a spiritual retreat there. But yeah, through doing that all the time and really testing my thoughts, and I think honestly it was through prayer I realized it wasn't for me. And to make a long story short, I realized one of the most valuable things out of that whole experience, even though I did nothing with my theology degree and I did nothing with all the years, nearly 10 years spent trying to be a monk, I realized one of the most valuable things of the whole story was I wasn't allowing, God's will for me to be done. And I was forcing my will. And,
yeah.
and I realized that. And I wasn't, at the time, I didn't realize that. I thought, here I am making this, pious decision, right, to go be a monk. But in reality, I was forcing my will. And
Y'all
the
know what
monastic
happens
life,
when we do that.
right? Yeah, exactly. And you're not allowing for God or
Spirit,
the divine
whatever.
to put you where you need to be, where you're most beneficial.
I've been working with that a lot this year. I saw a shaman in January at a plant medicine ceremony I went to, and that's the one thing he really led me into, that I have this like grip on the way things are going to go. I need to control like the way things are going to go and everything. So it's been my practice this year to surrender. And I think, it's happening in layers and layers and layers. And the more I surrender, the more my heart opens, the more opportunities open. And this is transpired through, a lot of work, some relational stuff, and plant medicine, really.
Wow.
Yeah. You were saying about when you go to the monastery and you're really alone with your thoughts. In July, I'm pretty sure I'm doing a vision quest. I'm going to the mountains. I think it's either in Peru or Ecuador, the Andes.
Wow.
And I'm going to be alone for 4 days with no food, barely, and no water, and just San Pedro.
Wow.
Yeah.
And are you going to be monitored during that time?
Yeah, they'll have me in they'll know. Yeah, I'll be monitored.
All right, cool. Safety is that's the only thing that comes to mind. Is
first year is 4 days, and the second year I think is 7 days, and then 9 days, and then 11 days, and then for the really brave, 13 days. So yeah, I'm excited to see if I can even make it for the 4. I think I can.
Yeah, I think you can. I mean, knowing you, I know you. If anyone can, you can.
Thank you. But yeah, the being alone with your thoughts, I think that's one of the main objectives there, because if you can be alone with your thoughts and not let it get the best of you, but surrender, then spirit can really talk to you. Because are you familiar with the gene keys?
No, not at all.
Okay, so it's kind of like this diagram to reaching your purpose. You should really look it up.
Yeah, what is it called again?
I'll send you the link. The gene keys, you type in your birthday, the day, the time, and everything you were born, and it gives you kind of like these different keys. I think there's 60 different keys, and for each part of your life, it's like a little map, and for each part of your life, there's a key that tells you the shadow, the gift, and the Sudi, which is like the highest expression of that trait or whatever. I'm just getting into it, but it's really interesting. Yeah. And a lot of people have been able to go towards their highest purpose through getting to know their gene keys.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. There's so much. It's so funny that there's so much we don't know.
Dude, I know.
So much in this world we're just discovering. Wow.
Yeah. So one of my shadows is deafness, which is, instead of being able to listen to spirit and my intuition, there's so much noise around that it kind of deafens my intuition and my inner knowing. And then even the internal chatter that we have, as humans. Like there's not only so much external chatter in the world and overstimulation, there's all this internal chatter now. And there always has been, but now it's mirroring and matching the external chatter. And it's just like, it's very hard to hear truth.
Wow. You know what you just said reminded me of something. So I like to study parapsychology because I love the psychic stuff and ESP, and which is probably why I do mentalism, right? But there was something called the Gainesfield experiments, which you might have heard of.
I don't think
but
so.
They found out that through psychic tests or testing for ESP, they found that if the conductors or the senders and the receivers, whoever's trying to do a mind reading experiment, subjected themselves to an isolation room where there was white noise and their vision was obscured, so they would essentially reduce their external sensations with the world, then they were more successful with the experiments than with all the chatter and all the sensations present.
Yes.
It kind of reminds me of that because
I
think the more you shut it off, the more in tune you are with something else.
And that's why we meditate.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we go on these silent retreats. Do you know Aubrey Marcus? Mm-hmm. Oh man, his podcasts are freaking amazing. You have to listen to him.
Aubrey Marcus. Okay, I'll try.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
That to me too.
Yeah, he did this. This is something I want to do as well. He did this 6-day darkness retreat and was in total darkness. It was in a room, so he had food and stuff, but it was like total darkness for 6 days.
Wow.
And he said nothing broke him like that.
Wow. That's extreme.
It is
very extreme. The monastic life, you're like living in a community, so like a commune. Mm-hmm. So it's extreme, but it's not that extreme.
But being alone, and I'm like really being called to these things, like where I want to be alone in the mountains with this plant medicine, and I would love to do the darkness retreat. And it like makes me wonder, like, what is calling me to that? Is there something inside of me that wants to be felt or be heard that with all the stuff around can't be?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but does it seem like you want to make a connect? Like there's something you want to make a connection to?
Yeah, I think either that or there's something either in me or something that wants to crack open in me that needs that.
So interesting.
This I don't think I've tapped into my potential. I've done some really, I've come a long way from where I was, but I just feel a wellspring inside of me of something, and I'm ready to unleash it.
Wow. It reminds me of something, because I guess the monastic life is, obviously connects to this, right? Because of separation and being one with nature and, sort of living a life of solitude. But there's an extreme version of that, which not everyone does, but they used to be done a lot more, but it was called being an anchorite or a hermit. Mm-hmm. And it usually was a monk who desires further isolation. So they get approval to live in the caves in Egypt, for example.
Whoa.
And so they'd go and live out in the caves. And granted, sometimes they would have certain luxuries, like, they would have the food delivered to them every month from the monastery, and they could attend the liturgy, so they could have some sort of connection with the world, with maybe not the world, but rather with some people, civilization. Mm-hmm.
And this is for a long period of time they did this.
Oh, yeah, this is their whole life. Wow. They lived as an anchorite. So they would die as an anchorite or a hermit. And it was a yearning. One of the ways, so when you're preparing for the monastic life, one of the best things to read was something called in Arabic, they call it Bustan al-Rahban, and it translates to the paradise of the fathers. And it's not meant for everyone to read, but it was really suggested to read if you're considering the monastic life or if you're already in the monastic life, because it was an order given by other monks. It was sort of like, you know, I've lived this life as a monk, and these are the things I want to impart on you that might make your journey easier.
Okay.
And so sometimes they're stories, sometimes they're a learning lesson or some sort of allegory or figurative language that, you know, have wisdom behind it. And when you read a lot of the stories, especially the ones about the anchorites or the hermits living in caves or, you know, in total isolation for the whole life, it always starts with this yearning. There's this something that's drawing them to doing this and to living this isolated life with nature, you know. And it's almost like it becomes like this strong feeling of desire to do this. So is that sort of what you feel like you're yearning or being drawn to that?
Not to isolation necessary for a long period of time, but which is probably the same thing. Like they were probably also communing with something bigger than their human.
Absolutely.
You know? And yeah, I think the probably the longest I would want to go is, you know, if I'm brave enough, the 13 days, a couple years down the road in the mountains. So I don't think I could do an extended period of time. And it's really hard to identify what exactly it is. Yeah.
Well, if you happen to do that particular retreat in Peru, I would love to hear.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to. I'm going to make it happen. Yeah.
I'd love to hear that, because it just sounds so fascinating.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, like the outcome, because
I'm pretty sure I'm going to die a few times, you know, like parts of me.
How many parts of metaphysically speaking, right?
Metaphysically speaking, I will die. I die again and again and again.
Sure. Now, I'm really curious to hear about your experiences, because I think that's so interesting. And I know how being left alone, detached from, you know, what our current life is about, right? The computer, the internet, the telephone, this and that. When you're detached from that,
this person thinks, what this celebrity, it just, even if you don't care, it's still there.
It is. You can't get away from it.
Yeah.
You know, your phone pings you.
Facebook, this app.
Yeah, it's an overload, right? It's an overload.
So I want to hear about when you got into your first relationship, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah. It was after seminary. I went on an online dating thing. It was actually there was two prominent ones at the time. There was OkCupid and Plenty of Fish.
Okay.
I think they're still around. I think those are still.
I think so. Yeah.
So there was no Tinder or any of that. This is like 2010, like 2009, 2010. So anyways, I went on a few dates from there and had pretty, I wouldn't say the best experiences from those very first dates. And, you know, it's discouraging, you know, like you're kind of like, well, you know, there must be a better way. And there is, right? Meeting people in real life.
Yeah, there's definitely a better way.
Definitely a better way. But, you know, online dating
gives you that a partner, for instance.
Manifesting a partner, at least putting yourself, you know, the one best, but maybe the good thing about online dating that you can say, it sort of expedites some process, right? Like, because, you know, you might see someone really attractive, but you don't know if they're single, right? But if they're on an online dating site, well, they're telling you what their status is, the relationship status. So you get your answer there.
Who knows if they're telling the truth?
Right? Yeah.
Same thing with real life, though.
Yeah, there's very deceptive things being done online. So yeah, that was my first experiences. My first girlfriend ever was did not. I don't know if you even want me to go there. I could go there.
Sure, go there.
It was definitely an interesting one. It didn't last very long. It was like, I think it lasted a month and a half. So, but actually that one's a very interesting story. I probably won't go too much into it because there's a lot about it that, it's probably not in the best, it's probably the best case scenario I don't talk about it.
Okay.
But let's just say the reason why it ended was she had an ex boyfriend, and I would inquire, especially leading up to the relationship, I'd inquire like, well, what happened with your ex? And part of it was I was sort of vetting, right, if this person's a good person to get in a relationship with. And so, being the curious mind that I was, and not having a lot of experience in dating, I thought that was the best approach, is just ask them what their past experiences were and why did their the last relationship they were in ended. And right, I thought so. And so when she told me the official story, well, first she would tell me certain fragments of the story that made me feel like she was still in love with this person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I thought, okay, well, if she still loves this person and I'm some sort of rebound, then I don't want to be in a relationship with this person, right? So I kept sort of pushing the issue, like, do you still love this person? Do you still have feelings for them? And if you do, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't feel there's anything wrong with that, but I should know because, I want to know where we stand, right?
Yeah. That's very mature of you for your first relationship.
Yeah, I guess I despite not having a lot of experience in that field, I was I approached it very logically.
Yeah.
And so she kept denying that there was any feelings remaining for this person, but the fragments of the story didn't ease my mind, let's just say, because there was just something. And I guess being that naturally intuitive, being able to read people really well, and
I was gonna say, at that time. Dude, doesn't that tear you apart? Like when your intuition is telling you one thing and the person is telling you another thing, it's like,
yeah,
that's fucking horrible.
Exactly. And you just know something's wrong.
Yeah.
You want to tell them, just be honest with me. Like you said, it's just uneasiness,
Yeah.
And so I still remember it was the Super Bowl. Like in 2010 or something, and I'm not really big in sports, but she invited me over, and she had a barbecue. And I remember I asked her that night again, like, so what exactly happened, right? You haven't told me the whole story, the whole picture of what happened with your ex. And then she finally told me that story. And the story was a lot worse than I think I could even imagine at that point. And it scared me. Yeah, it was, let's just say he ended up going to jail for something.
Okay.
And granted, and I don't want to get into too much details, but she played a big role in that. And so at that point, I was like, I felt that pit in my stomach feeling. And she said, the reason why I didn't want to tell you is because now you're not going to want to be with me. So then I started getting like fearful. Is she gonna like come up with some sort of weird allegation or something, and then I end up in trouble, And then so I ended the relationship, and I told her,
Was it hard for you?
It wasn't too hard. I think the fear. I mean, it's one of those things. I wish I told you the story to provide the context, right, of why I was so fearful. But I don't want to say it because I want to keep. Yeah. I want to keep some anonymity to this.
Yeah, you want to be respectful. That's
I want to be respectful.
Understandable.
But the context of it, the truth of that story was something that anyone, I think, in my position, getting in a relationship with someone like that, would bring on a lot of questions about that person's integrity and morals. And so at that point, the only thing I could come up with is you have to end it, and you have to end it in a way that safeguards you from that person trying to get you in trouble in some way. And so I remember I used an excuse. I still remember I used the excuse of, I don't know, I don't really feel too good. I think that barbecue was because they had a barbecue for the Super Bowl, and I was like, I don't know, I think something was wrong with the hot dog. but I just had to get out of that situation. So I remember I said, oh, I'm not feeling good, and I needed to go home, and I went home, and she knew. I think she knew. She knew that if she shared the story with me, that it's going to drive me away. It would drive anyone away. And so when I remember I got home and I sent her a message, a text message, right? Because I was like, I need this in writing. Like, I sent her a text message and I said,
Wow.
Based on what you told me, this and this and this and this, I can't be in a relationship with you. I think this is, I think the right thing to do is this and this and this, and that's up to you if you want to do that. But for my sake, I can't be in a relationship with someone like that. And I wish you the best of luck. And, and that was that, and she did reply after that I knew if I told you that this was going to be the outcome. And that was it. So that was my first, yeah, it was not, my first relationship experience was not very good. And then I didn't go in a relationship after that immediately. It took me a little while to even want to say, okay, well, let me try this again.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And, and then I did end up finding a girlfriend that was longer than a month. And that was good, but it ended because she was going to grad school in another state. And I was done with seminary at that point, and I had no intentions of going to grad school or anything like that. And so I didn't want to, I told her, I'm like, look, if you're going to another state, this long distance relationship thing seems like an obstacle, right? And
yeah.
So I suggested, well, if you like, we could sort of end things, and if you come back to Los Angeles, we can, if we both feel the same way about each other and we're both single, we could reconnect. And so we ended up breaking up amicably, but she ended up finding a boyfriend there, starting a relationship with that person. So it never, so when she did come back to LA, nothing came about from that. And then so I'm currently single. So to speed up the story, but I've not had the first relationship that was definitely a very rare case, right? I don't think anyone would ever or normally experiences that.
Yeah.
But after that, they've been pretty good, but for one reason or another, it ends. And like I said, I think this is probably the most, and I'm sorry I'm talking a lot here about this, but
that's what you're here for.
I think one of the most unique things I sort of discovered throughout the dating process is, I don't think I've ever been in love.
Really?
Yeah. And maybe it's sad to say that, but I don't think I've ever been in love with anyone.
I have a question for you. Do you feel safe to fall in love?
That's a great question. And that might have something to do with it. I think a big part of me observes, and maybe this is from my childhood, I observe by looking at others and seeing others going through life and what mistakes they make, right? And so I saw coworkers, friends who got in relationships and went through really bad breakups, and they were devastated and heartbroken.
Yeah.
And I've seen divorce, and I've seen what that could do. And so there was that part of me, again, protecting.
So what would happen if you looked at some really beautiful relationships?
Yeah, and there are those, right? My parents
are still
together. That's a good example.
Even the ones that end, painfully. There's so much to learn about, when you open your heart to somebody. If you really know, trust, and love yourself, you can love anybody you want to. You can love anyone you want to, and they may hurt you. You may hurt them. It might last forever, or it might last for a little while, but either way, you're going to be good.
Wow. Well said.
And I would choose love again and again and again and again and again. I am vowing to now keep my heart completely open, and anyone that I want to connect to and anyone that I want to love, I will not let fear stand in between that, because fear is to let you know when there's a dangerous situation. Love is never dangerous. Love is never dangerous, because if anything, you learn and you grow. It's expansive. And there's always a gift in it.
Wow. Beautifully said. Very and yeah, and you're right. You pretty much hit the nail on the head with, am I afraid to love, or am I protecting myself? And maybe perhaps that is what I'm doing to a big extent, right? Because I'm observing the world and I'm sort of protecting myself, right?
But you're observing the world by looking at mistakes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm looking at the negatives, right? I'm focusing on the negatives and the possible devastating outcomes without even giving the chance.
And so what if it hurts? It only is going to hurt. It only is going to hurt as much as you allow yourself to really truly open, and as much it's an equal thing. As much beauty as in it is going to be as much pain when it goes, and there's beauty in that sadness too, because it's a reflection of how meaningful that thing was to you.
Great point. That's a great point. It's funny too. I remember there was one point in my life I worked for a hotel and I drove a shuttle for the airport. This was like my second job at high school, and I would listen to. There's a radio station here in Los Angeles, 103.5, and at night or in the evening time, there was they would run this particular host and program called Love Songs on the Radio with Karen Sharp.
I thought you were going to say Delilah After Dark.
Oh, Delilah After Dark. That sounds more risque.
No, it's not. It's just love songs and people calling in and talking about their love stories. And
okay. Well, yeah, it's on the same. It's along the same lines. So Karen Sharp, and she had this amazing voice, and yeah, you would have callers who would, I'd like to dedicate this to my,
do you remember those days? That never happens anymore.
Well, yeah, now it's like XM radio and like that.
Send somebody a Spotify playlist.
Yeah, Spotify. Actually, Karen Sharp is still on the radio because I have a 2006 Corolla, so I have a CD player. I'm often listening to the radio, and yeah, there's still Karen Sharp on the radio. But it's funny because I used to listen to that, and amongst the dedications, there's always the breakups, right? The people who, I missed you. I wish wish it didn't end the way it ended, and I wish we could get back together, and then they would dedicate a breakup song. And then I realized, oh my God, there's a lot of breakup songs and there's a lot of hurt there. And yeah, we also have another station that it's called KRF 101, and it's like the oldies. And it's kind of fun too, because every now and then they'll put on a song and you really thought this is not going to be an oldie, but now it is. And you're like, oh my God, I grew up with this song.
Yeah, dude.
Like, dude, I'm getting old.
But, the thing is I feel younger and more vibrant than I ever have, even in my 20s.
Nice.
So age is...
Yeah, it's relative, right? It's
really, yeah.
Totally. But yeah, I guess so. I've never really been in love, and as far as a relationship setting, right? Like I've loved people, right? Like I love my parents. Even my ex-girlfriend, I love her, and I care about her, but it was really hard to say if I was in love,
What do you think the difference between love and in love is?
That's a great question. Because I had to try to define that, and it's not easily definable, right? It's also a relative thing. Everyone has their sort of perspective on it. And it's funny too, because post my last relationship ending, I started asking around, friends and acquaintances, and trying to get their, definition of what being in love is, right?
It's very hard to define, isn't it?
Oh my God, it is. Yeah. And let's put it in a song, right? There is a song that maybe
Where
perhaps
words fail, music speaks.
where
That's part of a song.
exactly, yeah, where words fail, music sometimes can just give that special feeling that what being in love is. And I remember a good friend of mine, we were talking about it, and he mentioned a song, and when I listened to the song, I was like, yeah, actually, I can see how being in love could be that way. And it was from Sting and the Police, Everything She Does Is Magic. Sort of like being in love, every little thing they
Reverence, devotion.
do. Yeah, reverence, devotion, total infatuation, beyond just, like every little thing they do is magical in your eyes. Even when
sacredness.
It's not so magical. Yeah, sacredness.
The sacredness, devotion.
Totally.
Dedication, reverence.
Absolutely. Yeah, all those things. And it's a totality of things. And like you mentioned, and
beauty.
Beauty. And it's almost like even beyond, it's all those things, I guess, combined when you feel that way about someone.
Seeing the divine.
Maybe seeing divinity in some way.
Yeah.
But I think all those things need to be present for me in order to take that next phase of a relationship, which would be marriage, right? And really committing myself, because it's not maybe because I don't want to sell myself short. I don't want to settle for anyone.
Yeah, no, me either.
I want to find all those qualities, right? And maybe it's a pipe dream.
That's the other part. No, it's not. But it's a decision. There's never going to be the perfect person. You decide to see the divine in the person that's in front of you. You decide to enter into the dojo of devotion with the person that's in front of you. And you're going to have to decide this multiple times, because there's going to be times where it's hard. So it's I feel like love is not really this magical thing that comes into your life. You have to make the magic. You and your partner have to make the magic. And sometimes you have to love it in the mundane.
Yeah.
You have to see the divinity in the mundane.
That's a very interesting way you're putting it. It's all I know, the one aspect of life I know is that my opinion tends to change,
Yeah, mine too.
Right? Like, I'm realizing, like, I'm growing, like, you never really stop growing. I'm in my 30s.
No, you don't want to.
You don't want to. Yeah. You never want to. And you're constantly learning. And the more you think the more you realize you really kind of don't know. And you start to look at things very differently. And, and I think that's depth, right? Like in magic.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm relating this to magic because it's, been my passion for so long. But in the magic world, you can almost gauge a person's level of interest and length of time in the art of magic, or the art of misdirection or illusion, by how they talk about it. Right? Because when the way they talk about it tells you how much thought they actually have given that particular subject. And it's so funny, because the more you realize someone has given a lot of thought to a particular subject, the more there's a lot of gray area, in some of their thinking, where they don't really quite have the answer, and they don't really always know. And I think that's a beautiful aspect of life too. Sometimes I think it's humbling to know you don't always really truly know. And I'm
because
always
then you can learn.
Yeah, exactly. Because then you learn.
If you think you know everything, right? You're not open to learning.
Exactly. I agree 100%. 100%. Ego. I know in the Eastern philosophy. Yeah. In the Eastern sense, and even in the Christian sense as well, ego is a big thing. It's not just, it's a big thing you have to put under control, because it prevents you from genuine growth and genuine experience. And it's the same. Actually, it's funny how it applies to even the things that aren't so spiritual, like something like stage performing. If you come away thinking like, oh, I know everything there is to know, and I'm a great performer, and yada yada yada, your brain almost stops wanting to improve because you think you know.
Right.
And
So
it's
true.
and then you get left in the dust by someone else who's framing their life in a very different way and thinking there's always room for improvement.
And in our field, the ego can sneak in when you're like leading clients to getting great results for themselves, and you're seeing this in a dude that it can feel so good. And then when that feeling feels really good, the ego's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
And you have to really be mindful of that.
Absolutely. Because then you can also come crashing down.
You can't suppress your ego. You just have to be like, you just have to treat it like a 2-year-old. Like, let it have its little moment. Okay, yeah. Oh, fantastic story,
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. Yeah, let it have its moment, but then move forward.
Yeah,
that is true. Yeah, you sort of and performing, there's a lot of ego in performing, performing arts in general, and because you're essentially, you have to be this amplified person on stage to garner attention and interest, and so sometimes it's a fine line, of sort of like try not to be that person off stage too, of this person who's trying to garner attention all the time. And it's a challenge. It's a challenging thing, but yeah, like you said, let it have its moment. And
because if we resist the ego, it's like we're in this battle with it. But if you let it do its thing, but you're mindful of when it's doing its thing, I think that puts you, I don't even want to say in control, because it's not really about control. It allows you to be present and see clearly. Because the ego just becomes something that's over here. It's not here,
That's interesting. Yeah, that's definitely an interesting thought. Yeah, ego definitely. I know ego for sure can prevent growth. I know that for sure. I've seen that.
It wants to keep us safe or whatever,
Yeah.
But,
and it feels good, right? It feels good to accomplish something and really see the reward.
Shit, I'm healing all these people.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. No.
But yeah. So yeah, love is a very it's a very hard thing to define, and being in love is a hard thing to define sometimes. And like you said, it's like a totality of things, and it's, and it's up to an individual.
I think it's different. It's different every time.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. I can certainly see how it can be. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's some core aspects that definitely have to be there. Growth, spirituality. Like, I don't think that I could really deepen into a relationship with someone who wasn't like spirituality and growth wasn't kind of like a central part of their life. So I think, yeah, it's different for everybody. We all have different desires, and we all have, there's different things that make our systems generate these emotions and these whatever love is. There are different things invoke this in us.
Yeah, totally. And it's good that you can define what it is you want too.
Yeah.
Because now
I got real clear on it after I let go of my last 3-year relationship. I got really clear on what I wanted. And that's another thing. Well, you get clear on what you want, but there's going to be some things that until you experience a relationship, you're not going to know, like, hey, I want that, or hey, I don't want that. It's only the experience that allows you to see that. And then you could have a connection with someone, and then you're like, oh, wait, so I thought I wanted all this stuff, but actually like this thing is really important to me too. So it's all a beautiful experience. And if you have that mindset, it makes it so much easier to open to it.
Yeah. That's a wonderful way to phrase it. Go back to that learning lesson from when I wanted to be a monk, and I was pushing my will rather than asking God for his will, or the will for the will, what's meant for me to be done. I think that could also apply to love too. Like, instead of trying to seek this in this plethora of people in this world, I could maybe ask a divine being to bring this person to light, perhaps, or to bring them into an area where I can meet them.
Yeah, if you want to learn about manifesting love, that's something I take my clients through. I'm happy to give you some tips.
Sure, yeah, why not? But yeah, I think there's definitely, there's no reason to, I think life is so...
The best dating app is the actual universe.
Yeah. It's so multifaceted, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's so much of life, and we're all just trying to, there is no manual to life, right? And we're all kind of...
Would you want one if there was? That would make it so boring. Right.
No, definitely not. No, definitely not. So it's worth experimenting. It's worth trying. And to not have that ego to say, I don't really, maybe out of my own determination and know-how and skill, I maybe can't find the right person based off of that alone. Maybe I need to seek some sort of divine help or guidance, or surrender. Yeah, there you go. Surrender. Absolutely.
So a good thing would be journal about your beliefs about love, and notice how those beliefs could be holding you back from that coming in. How do those beliefs that you have about love not align with the image of the love that you feel that you want? And how could you bring those into alignment? Integrate the two of those, whether you have to let go of some of those beliefs or what. How can you bring your beliefs about love and your idea of love into perfect harmony?
Interesting. Yeah, I can tell you've given this a lot more thought than I have.
And then
you have a lot more to offer.
Yeah, and then getting very clear on your preferences. So this I'll just tell you my process right now.
Sure.
So getting really clear on your preferences, writing down, get specific. I have things like blue eyes, earth sign. Who cares? Get as silly as you want to with it. Like, it's your manifestation. So you have those preferences of what you want to call in, so you could get an idea. But then you surrender that too, because you don't want to overlay a projection of what shows up if it's the true thing. What you're doing with those preferences is aligning with the feeling of having that. As you know, with NLP, you want to feel having that in your body. So what you'll do is you'll do the preferences, and then you'll write in your journal about your relationship as if it's already here. My partner and I are experiencing this, and I'm so grateful for this. Or, this trigger came up and this is how we've handled it. And I work with the moon on this stuff too. So during the new moon is when I'll do this journaling, and the full moon, I rip everything but the preferences out of the journal and burn it. The only thing that's there now is the preferences. I sent everything else out, and however that wants to show up, it'll show up.
Interesting. That is so interesting. Yeah, that like I said, you're always exposing me to something that I've never looked at before or even knew about. So this is definitely new. Definitely new.
Are you a manifester? Do you manifest?
That's a good question.
It seems like you would be a pretty good manifester, Nader.
Maybe, yeah. I haven't tested my manifestation abilities yet, but no, there are sometimes I've noticed, like, if I really want something, that somehow my mind will just kind of like figure out how to get it, or figure out how to get me closer to it, right? So I guess that's it's the most manifestation experience I've had,
It's
but
manifestation.
it's manifestation.
Did you go to Joe Tabanella's Law of Attraction workshop?
No, I
That's how I manifested
wanted
this
to.
house.
Oh wow, okay. That was one of actually I could still do that, right? Because
Yeah.
you can still do a lot of those AHA programs. But
Mhm.
yeah, I'm planning on doing that. I've heard a lot of great stories from people who've done it, and Joe's such a great guy. You know.
He really is. I would love to have him on the show, actually.
Yeah, actually,
I
if you
keep
do that,
forgetting to
that'd be
ask him.
great.
I've had Joe Burns on.
Oh, he's great. I love. Yeah, Joe Burns, Joe Tabanella.
Yeah. I think I'm going to
and
ask like both Joe and George next.
yeah, and George. Yeah, he's a plethora of information.
Yeah.
And, John Melton. You know, all of them are great. I remember, you know, that's the one thing about going through that program is the people you meet, you know, whether it's fellow students or whether it's
Yeah.
instructors, but they were all just so cool. And I, you know, I think that that experience of meeting people and really seeing different facets of viewpoints, right? Like you have a very
Yes.
different looking at things. And there's other students that have a very different way of looking at things. Just being exposed to that
I
was
agree.
just so
That was pretty powerful.
Oh yeah. And the one thing about seminary that it didn't give me the luxury of was, you know, seminary was it was a very untraditional school, right? So I didn't really meet a lot of very different types of people, right? It was all people who were Christian and they had similar theology. I was the different one because I was the Orthodox, you know, but in the school, there's just so many different people. Like it was just so fascinating. Some of the discussions in class that would just kind of take,
Yeah.
and for the good part, I mean, we would start on the subject and then it would just kind of go off into this whole different metaphysical, spiritual, new age
I love it. I've met some really interesting people. Yeah, like very interesting people. It really broke my heart what happened with Annika.
And, oh yeah, she was lovely. I mean, I had no idea she was going through, you know, medical issues. You wouldn't have never guessed.
It happened like right like in October.
Jeez, it was so sad too that I found out through, you know, we find out through a Facebook message. You know?
Yeah.
And I never met her in person, but I got to share a few classes with her.
Me either, but we talked on the phone for hours and hours. We were good friends.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, it's one of those things too, like you never really know what someone's going through because the face they're putting on, you know, it's a very different one than a lot of the struggles they may have physically and health wise.
And knowing that makes it so much easier to just be kind.
Exactly. Yeah. I think you just hit the nail on the head again. You know, it's really, you're always reminded that, you know, that life can be a very fleeting thing and it could be a very effervescent thing. And you really should try to treat people with as much respect and courtesy as possible, you know, because you never really truly know what they're going through.
Yeah. And, you know, the best way to find out is being vulnerable yourself.
Totally.
Vulnerability. I used to be scared of it, but now it's like a way of life for me. Yeah. Vulnerability is so beautiful.
It is. Yeah, it is. And it's just being you. It's being authentically who you are. I think people shy away from it. I know, you know, for a guy too, right? Like, you know, being from the Middle East. Yeah. Middle Eastern guys don't show their vulnerable sides very often.
I was going to ask, we didn't really get into that. So let's touch on that really quick to end it. So how was that for you? Was your dad vulnerable? Were you given like open spaces to be vulnerable and express yourself emotionally in your home?
Well, you know, because we had a very small, you know, small family. It was my mom, dad, sister, and myself. And in the Middle Eastern kind of mindset or tradition, the boy, especially if it's the only son, he becomes this sort of almost like the man in charge at some point of the family, because the dad becomes an elderly man, and the mom becomes elderly, so therefore they're reliant upon their kids to take care of them, and the one figurehead of that is going to be the son. So there's a lot of emphasis put on the son. And because of that, there's a sort of maybe a subconscious nurturing that happens where maybe it's not intentional. They're not like intentionally, like consciously trying to groom you a certain way, but there's a subconscious definite grooming where you're taught to be strong, and you're taught to be a man, and you're taught to be responsible, and take on a lot of responsibility.
And that denies you of half of your human experience.
It certainly can. Absolutely. Yeah, it certainly
can. And then, when you get older, so you're told, like, be a man, be strong, hold yourself together. And then you get older and you get into a relationship, and women are like, why doesn't he know how to express his emotions? Like, he doesn't know, like.
Good point. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Then that's exactly right. For the Middle Eastern guy, it's not, crying is a sign of weakness. You don't cry, you're a man.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful when men are able to show that level of vulnerability.
Yeah, I think it's a natural thing, right? It's a natural excrescence of life. If you have this emotional impact, your body wants to release it somehow.
Yeah. And if it doesn't,
or emotion,
if it doesn't release, it's going to stay in your body, and it's going to manifest in illness, anger issues, relationship issues. It's going to show up. I talk about this a lot. It's going to show up in every area of your life in one way or another. Yeah. This energy has to move through your body. It has to be expressed. It has to be experienced and felt fully. And once we learn how to do that with our emotions, that's another thing that makes it easier to go into any experience.
I agree. You have to express yourself, right? You have to release it. Now, I guess the way you express yourself could be different for people, but
sure.
But yeah,
you can feel it if it's going in. If it's stuffing, you can feel that's a felt sense. And then it becomes numb and it becomes not a felt sense. But you can feel into whether you're stuffing or releasing.
Totally, absolutely. And it's you see it a lot more, in certain cultures for sure, because of this sort of I don't want to say tribal, it's but in a sense it kind of is, like, because there's a way that community has survived for so long, and so there's a model in place, and whether that model,
isn't there a way we could have both? Like, isn't there a way that men could be these strong men and then still, like, also have a container where they can express and release their emotions? Because women, I mean, we are very alivened and we're always expressing and whatever, but as we become awakened, we do this in a healthy way. So why can't men do that too, in a way to where they can still be strong? And I think that's what we're stepping into. I think we're stepping into where men and women are going to be able to integrate both their masculine and feminine aspects. So.
Yeah, no, I don't see why not. Why can't a man fully express himself on an emotional level and still be strong? I think you can.
Yeah.
And I think
you're stronger because you don't have the weight of.
Yeah, I agree. You're right. You're even stronger, right? And it's all projection, right? Like it's in that mindset that a guy can't express himself, it's because he wants to project himself as this capable, strong,
right?
I got things under control, I could take care of my family, that sort of framing. But you're right. In reality, when there's all these bottled up things that they're not fully expressing, then that could lead to turmoil, and it could lead to sadness, depression, and it can lead to anger management issues and all kinds of stuff.
As mothers and lovers and friends, it's partially our job to show men that they can do this, that it's invited and welcomed. Because men have this thing that wants to crack open too, you know, just because we're different genetically and have different genitals, we're all souls.
Yeah, we're all humans, right? We're all humans, and we have that that common quality of wanting to be seen and wanting to express ourselves and be understood, right? But yeah, it's so yeah, the Middle Eastern guy typically has this sort of cultural nurturing that happens, and like I said, it's not consciously, sometimes it's sometimes subconsciously, and you're not really,
so much of it is really,
yeah, so much of it is, and and so I grew up that way too. I grew up that it's best for a guy not to cry, or show emotion, and you should be strong, and you need to be dependable and reliable, and those things, and yeah, and going back to what you just said, it's really, it needs to be a balance, right? There needs to be this harmony of being able to express yourself and and it doesn't necessarily negate or undermine you being strong.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. Well, I think we're getting there. Yeah. So so do you have any good shows coming up that you want to tell us about?
Sure. So I just got done doing a run at the Magic Castle, which I love to do because the Magic Castle is it's like this exclusive club that's been around for magicians since 1963, and it's the the best magicians in the world perform at the Magic Castle without a doubt. Right? And in fact, to perform at the Magic Castle, because most of the members of the Magic Castle are consistent of magician members and associate members, you're going to be seen by other magicians. So if you're a booked act at the castle, you're going to be seen by magicians. So the entertainment director, his name is Jack Goldfinger, he makes sure he puts magicians who other magicians can appreciate the show too. So you're being scrutinized by other magicians. Awesome. So the show has to be good, right? It's like the Friars Club, like how comedians have the Friars Club. It's like that, but it's for men. So I just recently finished a run there, and I have a few public shows, but generally most of my shows are private shows. They're mostly, birthday parties, company events. Those, I can't just simply invite anyone. They're not open.
Yeah, understandable.
But I have a couple of public ones coming up. There's one called Magic at the Vineyards, which is run by two good friends named Raven and Miggs. So I'm doing my 45-minute show there, and then there's another one that's coming in Haven City Market, right next to Rancho Cucamonga and like the Inland Empire area, called Magic Meets Food. And I'm doing a 40-minute show there. So yeah, a few public events, but generally they're mostly all private. And yeah, the public events are great though, because you can invite friends, I could promote them a little more. Yeah. So that's always fun. I love performing. Performing is, besides it being my job, which is in itself a magical thing, right? That I get paid doing something I love, which is a rarity. Yeah, it's a rare quality to find. But performing, there's just something about it. It's really, as a mind reader too, as a mentalist, you're connecting with people. And when you're connecting with people and really trying to read their mind or make that connection with them to be able to read their mind, you're showing them a process, a process of being almost outside of a showman. Although you're putting on a show and you're an entertainer, there's a part of that you separate that showman facade or entertainer facade, and you're connecting with someone, and in that connection, it's a beautiful thing.
Connection is amazing.
Yeah, totally. It's the same connection you make in hypnosis.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to follow you, would I just include your Instagram and Facebook? Is there any other socials that you would like me to include in the show notes, or a website?
Yeah, I would probably say, there is a website, themastermentalist.com. Okay. However, Instagram is probably the best way.
Yeah,
I post more on Instagram.
I've built 2 websites that I don't even use.
Same here. I don't update that thing. I just have it up,
Yeah.
But Instagram, the Master Mentalist. That's my Instagram handle. I have another Instagram handle, but I'm probably going to deactivate it. You end up finding like, oh, I do hypnosis, so I should do a hypnosis one, and I should do a
Yeah.
hypnosis
And then it gets to be way too much.
It gets you way too much. Then you realize you're only really focusing on one of them anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Master Mentalist is the one I tend to focus on the most on Instagram.
Okay. Yeah, I think I follow you on Instagram.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you do.
So
I
I'll
follow
include
you.
all of that in the show notes and everything. It's been a really amazing conversation. I love how many
Yes.
different turns it took, and the undulation of it was really beautiful.
Oh, and we like you said, we had no anticipation or expectation of what.
That's what I like to do. I feel like this is a very like, masculine podcast. Like it's about men. So I like to have like a very feminine flow to it to give it that harmony. And I think that's what helps to invite men to really open.
Well, you brought a wonderful harmony to this conversation.
So did you, Nader. It was awesome.